Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. This is Tom Navolis, your host, and this is the month of September program. Once again, all I can tell you is that there is just no way that I'm going to be able to complete everything that I have written for the program in the next 45 minutes. So I would encourage you to go to samueladamsreturns.net and look at the full write-up that I'm doing on this subject, which I haven't told you yet, or you can go to some of the other links where you may be following me and be able to get the full document. So what is this month's program? I was looking at a number of different issues over the last month, but the one that constantly sticks in my mind and should in everyone else's minds in relationship to what's going on in the economy, what is happening in every aspect of our political system, really wraps itself around this immigration confusion. And with that, I want to bring in the most recent commentaries, well, not the commentaries themselves, but a perspective on Springfield, Ohio, as an example of all this confusion. Now, what I want to start with is from a foundational first principles perspective. We are living out immigration confusion with Springfield, Ohio, as one example. You must be patient and get through the confusion that I'm describing at the onset of the program before I take you into those first principles, even though I'm going to tease you with some of that right at the beginning. But there's a lot that we're not going to be able to cover just because of the depth of the information. Now, you have to understand those first principles of constitutionalism from that foundation were intended around naturalization. Immigration was important as to then how did we nationalize or naturalize someone into being a citizen. And it may shock you to know that the founders believed in open immigration. That means allowing people to come from different countries, but there were parameters in such that the first intent of the Constitution was to protect the citizens here first and foremost. And when you read the debates on the Constitution, especially as we'll look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, and when we look at that, you'll see, especially from the debate perspective, which I'm not getting into the details here of, but to some extent, that in that there was a lot of discussion about the type of people that should immigrate. And then the expectations that were wrapped around these people as they would come in and want to be citizens. Did they all want to be citizens? Were we cautious of bad characters, bad actors, bad people? The answer is simply yes. So as always, I'm going to be making a lot of comments on this recorded program that are not in the written version. And, I'm well known to go off script, which I've already done just in this very opening paragraph or so. So let's dive back to what I have written and see if I can follow along with this, because it's a historical diversion from what I just prefaced the opening with. John Adams wrote in Novanglos, the thoughts on government, the defense of the Constitution, and I'm going to use my voice, but in written there's emphasis there with italics and bold and underlying. But here's what John Adams was writing in the defense and thoughts on government, defense of the Constitution. In this section he goes, the patricians were alarmed, and he's going through this whole reference on Rome. What happened in Rome? How did the political system work? For your knowledge, those that may have it. Our founders were very clear in understanding history, especially ancient history. We don't even teach enough about American history, let alone ancient history. So in this is where John Adams is talking about the patricians were alarmed, but Cassius had numbers on his side and was so confident of success that he betrayed too soon his ambitious design by offering the freedom of the city to aliens who, by his and at his invitation, crowded from all parts to vote in the assemblies of the Roman people. This convinced all parties that his views were, by the means of aliens and indigent citizens, to usurp the government. All parties combined against him, and he was condemned for treason. The tribunes had no sooner destroyed Cassius than they adopted his project and insisted on the law for the nomination of 3 commissioners. Now, I hope you caught my emphasis in there, and that ambitious designs to use and open the doors, giving the freedom of the city to aliens. Not just Springfield, Ohio, but other cities throughout the United States, is that the doors are open, the whole freedom of the city, that every aspect of the city is open to aliens. But these aliens, by the means of aliens and indigent citizens, the plan was to usurp the government. So nothing new under the sun, as I always say. So the same strategies used then are used now within the uniparty, who's adopted the plan, the oligarchs, and the corporatists of our present systems. So from Samuel Adams to the legislature of Massachusetts, January 16th, 1795. Elections are the immediate acts of the people's sovereignty, in which no foreigners should be allowed to intermeddle. Upon free and unbiased elections, the purity of the government and consequently the safety and welfare of the citizens, may I not say altogether, depends. And then again, to the legislature of Massachusetts again, on January 27th, 1797, that elections may not be contaminated by strangers or unqualified persons. May it not be necessary that every man may be known as far as possible when he presents himself to give his vote. This may be more especially important in our seaports and other populous towns in which many foreigners of all sorts frequently reside. I would be far from dictating to you, but I would submit to your judgment whether, considering the liberty of this country to foreigners and the frequency of their naturalization, it may not be eligible that such foreigners should be required, when they offer their votes to the selectmen of a town, to produce authentic certificates from the court by which they were endowed with so high a privilege as a test of their citizenship. Well, now we have cities and counties and areas and even states allowing for foreigners with no allegiance to that community, that state, to become participants in elections, in local elections, let alone federal. Now, as you can tell from Sam Adams' perspective, no election, nowhere, local, state, or national elections, voter identity is necessary, and simply no foreigners can vote. Now, in these last few minutes, no way am I going to be getting to all of the context of what I want to, but let's look at this and continuing with from that first perspective, moving from that just quick historical steps. The difference between the perspective on immigration from our founders and the present is that at the founding, there were not any public services or taxpayer buckets of money for aliens coming into the United States. In other words, no handouts and no bureaucracies manipulating the system. Also, the issue of allegiance was crucial. Now, at the end of the newsletter, the end of what I have written, I have something very constructive and instructive about this from both George Washington and from John Quincy Adams, which I hope you'll go and look at SamuelAdamsReturns.net to get to this document and to read it in its totality, because here's a snippet. John Quincy Adams said, if you're coming here to this country, it's not easy. There aren't no handouts. If you're a person of means, then you'll have an easier time. But if you're not, you're going to have to bust your butt. And that's modern terms for what it is. And you're going to have to prove your family. You're going to have to prove your worth to this nation, to the society to which you're choosing to become a part of. No handouts. That means no freebies, no taxpayer dollars, none, nada. Stop it. And that's the problem we have. And one of the areas that I'll be pointing you to probably in the next segment. So I'll be delving into those first principles of constitutional structure for immigration, naturalization, as it was developed in not only the Constitutional Convention, but then after in legislation, which is mandated in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 on citizenship, naturalization. In addition to the University of Chicago Press, the Founders Constitution, that massive volumes of books that I have, I will be directing your attention to a great article from Hillsdale College on this topic, and you're going to have to go see the references on that, and that the subheading in the article is on assimilation. It's way down there at the bottom of that article, and assimilation is what our founders intended, and the article there from Hillsdale was well written in that regard. And then, as one can ascertain, anybody that is watching this or anybody that has any sensibility whatsoever, what is going on in our present time is a complete confusion of constitutional intent versus political rhetoric and the unlearned truth for those desiring to keep the United States as they believe it should be. So many think what the United States should be, but they don't understand that we are not functioning as a constitutional republic any longer, and that they're only imagining it because they don't know the Constitution. They don't understand all that has been going on. So they're all in a riot about something, or just kind of messed up. So, but what if the confusion is that lack of knowledge of original intent? And then the ideological globalist and corporatist perversion of that constitutional intent. That was a question. But I absolutely believe that is what's going on. As I always say, is that back in, 1861, a fifth grader knew more about the Constitution than what the people that are leading this nation in Congress do. And especially the bureaucrats are so perverted in their ideas of how this republic should function that we are and have been allowed to be in this destructive mess we live. Come on back in the next segment for more. Welcome back to the second segment. We're going to jump right into Springfield, Ohio, from that whole idea of immigration confusion as just one example throughout the whole United States. So in getting into this, we're going to look at the immigration confusion and confusions that are occurring are not specific to Springfield, as I already mentioned. This month of September's program and commentary is not about any particular ethnic group or nationality. This program is about concerted effort by ideologues to alter the social and political structure of local communities, states, and the nation for their own economic, social, and oligarchical benefits. This small town city in Ohio is an example of what is going out throughout every state in the Union. The confusion is exasperated by the deception of rhinos like Governor Mike DeWine, not helping the citizenry to understand the first principles of constitutionalism in this regard. So then, also, naturally, the leftist governors in other states function only on an ideological and tyrannical basis when it comes to migration, immigration, the terminology, the narrative, all of that. So a little bit of a funny here. You have to notice I did say Governor Mike DeWine instead of Mike DeSwine because I didn't want to take and insult pigs anymore. But I'll tell you what, he's such a deceiver. And, you know, I always have to say at least pigs, swine are and have a useful purpose within the food chain. Okay, enough of that, on Governor DeWine, as he misleads people with a quarter truth, not even a half truth, by claiming that the Haitians in Springfield are legal. The legality of this issue at hand is how the federal government is forcing open immigration and my so-called migration with the full intent to financially burden local resources and possibly supplant the existing citizenry through manipulation of immigration laws and programs. And I want you to take, and I'm going to mention it a couple times, but there is, James O'Keefe is coming out with a documentary, A Line in the Sand. You need to watch it. You need to take a look at it because it's about follow the money. And I'm going to ask a couple questions here about Governor DeWine. So there may be some individuals and families of these and other aliens that have arrived legally more than 5 years ago, but as noted in the article, and there's a link there to Governor DeWine and the media claim Springfield Haitian migration is legal. There is a lot of play on words and false sympathies protracted with the misuses of immigration policies of the Biden administration. DeWine claims that the Haitians are migrants and are legal. Are they truly migrants and legal based on first principles? We'll see shortly. Statements by politicians and bureaucrats without rational argument and fact lead to the great contentions being exhibited. The issue at hand is not the Haitian people per se, except the criminal element, of course. The issue is an improper representation of the programs that the Biden administration is using to flood already financially and service-strapped communities. Follow the money. Follow the money. The Department of Homeland Security is maximizing the use of the Immigration Parole Program to flood illegals into states and cities. That's the IPP, Immigration Parole Program. In the case of Springfield, the majority of the Haitians are under the immigration parole program, and temporary protected status, which are the mechanisms by which many of these people are being trafficked for modern slavery into communities everywhere in the U.S. DeWine admits in his op-ed that the Haitians in Springfield are there to boost the economy. See the above article as well as other articles that are available in the references. Those of you and those of anyone that might be listening to this that have a good understanding of these programs for illegals know that the IPP and the TPS give false status to those who do not belong in the U.S. as designed in rational immigration law, but are here most evident by various government-funded entities manipulating the system for their entry and often abuse. This is, again, follow the money. James O'Keefe has some very interesting components for you to take a look at. And again, I think that movie comes out either October 8th or October 10th. So you need to get that. I think it's going to be on Tucker Carlson as a pay-per-view or whatever. I don't know. But the details of follow the money, the corruption is so deep. The greatest question that needs to be answered in all instances is, who is financially benefiting from these humans who have been transported, I'd say trafficked, to the likes of Springfield, Ohio? Various investigative citizen journalists have been finding that PPPs, or private-public partnerships, and other entities and individuals who own housing, transportation, and large companies are making a lot of money at the expense of their fellow citizens, tax money going to those in the programs, and then to those who own the houses, own the transportation, and own the businesses. This is a new form of modern slavery, and these people don't even know it because of the lands that they came from. Line in the sand, here I have it right here for you, is I'm totally supporting the movie being released October 10th. The Line in the Sand by James O'Keefe. You got to read the promo article and see the trailer at the link that I have here at SamuelAdamsReturns.net. Just remember that the political elite like DeWine, oligarchs, and corporatists will always find ways to manipulate the system and the narrative. So too do organizations that are pro-migrant. There's a number of them that are out there, and I just won't even begin to list them. But I've seen a number of them in action in a lot of other areas in human resources that is disgusting, the amount of money that they get. Your tax dollars. It's time to say stop. Tell the politicians, stop the money. Stop it. They like to manipulate the narrative such that the shenanigans look as if everything's under control and it's legal. Is it? Is it really legal? They skirt the law in so many different ways. They manipulate it, as I said. More importantly, follow the money on this new form of slavery and replacement philosophy for national dominance. Additionally, this video is interesting to watch. Its title is Tensions Rise in Springfield, Ohio Town Hall, September 24th, 2024. This is at an actual city council meeting. Important to go watch that one and hear the reactions of different people from different perspectives. But it is what it is. So in the last few minutes here, I just want to jump over real quick for you. I have in the detail in what I have written. There are several quick points on IPP and TPS. And before I move to those foundational principles, which we'll get to in segment 3, because I want to give you some quick points about IPP and TPS and Haitians in particular. The key here is that politicians and bureaucrats for a century have not followed constitutional intent. Corporatists greatly influence how policies would be prevented, such that we now have an invasion of illegals as a national crisis. The following are directly from a liberal website called Boundless, and I quote here. The IPP, or the Immigration Parole Program, there's a link to it. Immigration parole is granted to certain non-citizens, allowing them to temporarily live and, in some cases, work in the United States without fear of deportation. Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security is able to grant parole status for urgent humanitarian reasons or reasons pertaining to public interest. The law does not strictly define these terms, leaving it up to the Department of Homeland Security and its three sub-agencies to determine their meaning. Once again, the narrative. How's it manipulated to allow things to happen? That's why Mayorkas is always saying, what I'm doing is legal. I have the authority to do this. It's important to note that, similar to the Deferred Action for Child Arrivals, DACA program, immigration parole is not an immigration status, nor does it mean that a person has been officially admitted into the United States. What a play on words. So I contend that the following two types of IPP are being used for the Haitians and many others that are being trafficked. Significant public benefit parole. So this type of parole generally implemented when a non-citizen who is otherwise unable to enter is needed as a witness in the courts, usually involving international drug trafficking or pertaining to national security. In this case, all the people are being trafficked, so they can contend that, the cartels, they can take and be witnesses on all the cartel activity. Right. In rare cases, public benefit parole might be extended to non-citizens seeking experimental medical treatment. In this case, it might be argued that the public would benefit from the knowledge gained during the administration of the treatment. How bogus is that? So you got all these diseased people coming in, and guess what? They're here for treatment. What can we learn from that? Once again, human guinea pigs to be experimented on. Oh, isn't that, who was that Gestapo Dr. Mandela? Here's another one, urgent humanitarian parole. So you can see the website that I have linked there. This type of parole is issued based on humanitarian grounds, such as an urgent medical or family emergency, extenuating circumstances in an applicant's home country. Boundless put together a detailed guide on the humanitarian parole process. So the thing is Haiti's all going to hell in a handbasket. Guess what? Those people need to get out of there. No. Those people need to fight. They need to pick up SIDS and stakes and whatever else they can find. Pitchforks, by golly day, and go fight for freedom. Go fight for their nation. Go take it away from the criminal element. But they don't have a Reformation theology. They don't have a Christian background sufficient to be able to do that. So anyway, in the last 50 seconds, all I have to say is that I further contend that these programs are being misused to fill jobs with a labor force that supplants the citizens of any town, city, region, or state, so as to have minions that vote to maintain power mongers and make those providing services such as housing and transportation wealthy at the expense of those enslaved in these programs, and more so at the expense of the taxpayers. You and I, we're the ones fitting and footing the bill. Can you afford that? I can't. We'll get into TPS, and then we'll get to first principles as we come back into segment number 3. Return with me to Samuel Adams as he returns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Now I want to get into TPS real quick and then jump to some of our finishing points on the first principles. So TPS, included in the Immigration Act of 1990, go think of who was in office in 1990, is a power for the Attorney General, the head of the Department of Justice, to grant temporary protected status, a non-permanent status that allows its guarantees to work and live in the United States to individuals from other countries where the returning to that country is not a safe option. The status can be granted if the country is affected by armed conflict, unprecedented natural disaster, or other extraordinary and temporary conditions. So this is where Governor DeWine and all of these other politicians who are probably benefiting somehow financially, they figure DeWine has a foundation in his daughter's name to help Haitians. So what other foundations are out there as a cover for people, politicians and bureaucrats and others to make money off of you and I, the taxpayer, but they are granted this because of an armed conflict, unprecedented natural disaster, or other extraordinary temporary conditions. So they are not legal in the sense that DeWine wants you to think they're legal immigrants. No, they're brought in on a temporary status, which that status can be rejected at any time. Now, until 2003, immigration was administered by the Department of Justice. The Homeland Security Act of 2002 created Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and 3 immigration agencies: the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, USCIS, and the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, CBP. Eventually, the power to grant TPS shifted by statute from the Attorney General to the newer position of Secretary of Homeland Security, none other than Mayorkas. So once again, there's a tie point. So how is TPS determined? Real quick. Whether or not a country is given a TPS designation is at the discretion of the Secretary of Homeland Security. DHS is required to consult with other federal agencies like the Department of State, Defense, or Justice in creating the designation for a country or even a part of a country. And there is more on this page that is titled Temporary Protected Status Explained, and there's a link right there. So understanding temporary legal status for immigrants in the United States. That's what it's all about, right? So the most interesting contention that the U.S. citizen should have about this program is that it opens the doors to all of our resources, with not one iota of those being given the status under TPS requiring them to have allegiance to the United States or as intended from a constitutional first principles perspective. If you're going to come to the United States, you're coming to become a citizen. That was one of the first principles. It's not a freebie just to come here. Even when Washington said he would hope that people out there that have problems would come to this nation to come and be citizens, to assimilate into our society, our understanding of first principles of constitutionalism as a republic. That's not what they're here for. They're here to suck the life out of the rest of us. And I'm using that pretty harshly because that's what happens when our tax dollars are used in such a manner for such programs. All right, I'm getting off track here. Additionally, this is supposed to be a temporary status. Those with TPS should be working towards returning to their country of origin. Instead, they are bilking billions of dollars from the U.S. taxpayer. They are negatively impacting every human resource reserved for citizens. That's what original intent was. Everything in America is reserved for the citizen. And worse, they are being taken advantage of by greedy politicians, business owners, and public service organizations. Lastly, regarding the use of TPS by the Department of Homeland Security's leadership, they very well are most likely violating the use of TPS when considering just this from the requirements for being granted TPS. And this is right out of the TPS rules. Be a national or a habitually stateless resident of a country with TPS. Another, be continuously physically present in the United States since a country's TPS designation. Have continuously resided in the United States since a date specified by the Secretary of Homeland Security. And here's the big one. Pose no threat to the U.S. for nefarious, criminal, or national security related reasons determined by the relevant U.S. agency. An applicant's criminal and immigration history play an important factor in determining eligibility. Incidents and behavior in the person's country of origin before arriving to the United States are also evaluated. So in this point alone, from the Homeland Security's sub-departments, this alone disqualifies numerous people. All right. This is where there are inviolate. This is where we don't hear in the congressional hearings. Hey, you got all these illegals coming in and you're giving them TPS and they're criminals. Hey, they're national security risks. Hey, they're here for nefarious reasons. Look at all the Venezuelans and all of that are coming in that way. Hey, they have other problems. They have medical issues. They have this, they have that, they have this, they have that. And none of them want to swear allegiance to the United States and this Constitution for a republic. But again, as I said, we're not functioning as a constitutional republic anymore, so who cares? What does it matter? Oh, what type of clouds are you living in if you think that we have been a constitutional republic for the last 80 plus years? You have this fantasy of what it looks like. You have this fantasy of what it should be. But what have we allowed it to be? All right, let's go to the first principles in these last 6 minutes. I'm not going to be able to get into everything here. So I'm going to take you back to, once again, the Founders Constitution. There's a link there to the whole thing and jump right to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4. And there's a link specifically to that. And the key points here, as we go back to 1765 and William Blackstone's commentaries, which is a sublink in those references there that I have for you, is that William Blackstone's commentaries on the English loose constitution and English law quite first and most obvious division of the people is into aliens and natural-born subjects. Natural-born subjects are such as are born within the dominion of the Crown of England, that is, with allegiance, or as it is generally called, allegiance to the king, and aliens such as born out of it. Allegiance is to the tie or ligmen, which binds a subject to its rulers. So I'm going to skip down, and it is clear and obvious that in these United States, we have very few natural-born citizens that have perpetual and true allegiance to their state or this nation as the United States. So there's a dilemma, and it's seen in the global citizen. For this natural allegiance was intrinsic and primitive and antecedent the other, and cannot be divested without the concurrent act of the prince to whom it was first due. So when you're a natural born citizen, and this was under everything relative to what was going on in England, your allegiance was to that local lord, that local community, and then to the unity that would fall under the king of that time. Aliens or strangers born forever outside of the domain, they had no allegiance. They would have to transfer or pledge their allegiance and reject everything else that they were ever associated with. So on this first principle, allegiance, we must teach it again in every format of education for the natural born citizen first, and then to those that really want to become a part of an American society, not bringing and trying to put a Haitian or an Arabic or this or that or other society into America and coexist in America. That was not original intent. Original intent was what we'll get into as assimilation. Now, St. George Tucker in the second principle is inclusive of citizenship. And in getting into that, it's a long read, it's complex of what this is under the Articles of Confederation, and then as it moves into, and the reason for Clause 4 in the federal Constitution. But let's summarize it in this. What St. George Tucker says is that the federal court, consisting of Judges Wilson and Blair of the Supreme Court and Judge Peters of the District Court of Pennsylvania, at a circuit court held that in 1792, a decision that the states individually still enjoy a concurrent jurisdiction upon which the subject of naturalization, but that their individual authority cannot be exercised so as to contravene the rule established by the authority of the Union. But then this was taken and looked at by another decision that was held in the courts, and saying that by a subsequent act passed in the 7th Congress in Chapter 28, it is also declared that any alien being a free white person may become a citizen of the United States or any of them on the condition therein and not otherwise. And the conditions were set that they would take, prior to the adoption of the Constitution, people inhabiting the different states might be divided into two classes, that of the natural born and those that were within states. So they were even talking about aliens being from one state to the other. You have to understand that. And then what happened and the way that it rounded out from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution was that the federal Constitution had the overriding perspective on what it meant to become a citizen. So an alien American antecedent to the Revolution was entitled to all the rights and privileges of an alien in England, and even many more. So in this last minute, we have to jump down to a short conclusion. And what I wanted to do is take you through, and I'm jumping many pages right now for my final point, is that John Adams wrote this: "My opinion with respect to immigration is that except the useful mechanics and other particular descriptions of men or professions, there is no need of extra encouragement while the policy or advantage of it is taking place in the body. I mean, the settling of them in a body may be much questioned. For by doing so, they retain the language, habits, and principles, good or bad, which they bring with them. Whereas, by an intermixture with our people, they or their descendants get assimilated to our customs, manners, and laws, in a word, soon become one people." Then we don't have enough time, but go to John Quincy Adams here at the end, and he talks about that. Hey, it's not a free ride, folks. You might have some financial capacity to come to the U.S., and if you're affluent, you may be able to do property in moderation with safety. And if you're indigent, But industrious, you might be able to get along if you're frugal and all of that. But if you're not, don't even bother, because it's going to be hell bent for you to try and become something. Come on back next month when Samuel Adams returns and we discuss something new.